Hey there, this is Krisha Anand, and welcome back to my channel on how to analyze research papers. In the past few videos, I've been looking at how to analyze an abstract, but a lot of people do also argue that you should in fact start with reading the introduction instead of the abstract, and that you should read the abstract last. So I thought we could take a look at how to look at an introduction first, standalone, for a particular scientific paper, which I will be breaking up into 2 videos. And hopefully this way you can get a better understanding of which method works for you best. Now before we dive into this video, subscribe to my channel for notifications on all my future videos. And if you enjoy the series, please give this video a like. So the article I found for today is from Frontiers in Human Neuroscience, and it's a clinical case report discussing the efficacy and brain imaging correlates of an immersive motor imagery BCI-driven VR system for upper limb motor rehabilitation. So I've just been looking into VR lately, and I honestly think it's just one of the coolest things ever. And I've been also obsessively binging Beat Saber videos on YouTube, so there's that. And I was wondering about some potential applications for VR, and I found this article. So this first paragraph here is the abstract, which we're going to skip for today because we're looking at the introduction. But I often do start with the abstract just because on a lot of articles online you have to pay to see the full article, but the abstract will be free. So I just kind of got into the habit of reading this first. But in the abstract, they kind of discuss an overview of everything that happens in the paper. They include like an introduction, a short summary of the introduction, a summary of methods, a summary of results, and because of all of that, it could also introduce author bias. So that's why for today we're going to skip this and analyze the intro first. Okay, so let's take a look at this. They say that worldwide, stroke is a leading cause of adult long-term disability. So straight away we can tell that when they talk in the title about upper limb motor rehabilitation, the motor rehabilitation they're referring to is most likely to rehabilitate from the effects of stroke. So they say, from those who survive, an increased number is suffering with severe cognitive and motor impairments, resulting in loss of independence in their daily life, such as self-care tasks and participation in social activities. Rehabilitation, following stroke, is a multidisciplinary approach to disability which focuses on recovery of independence. So in these first few sentences here, they give us a brief introduction of what the issue is, aka what the effects of stroke are, what they're trying to rehabilitate from, and then also what rehabilitation is. It helps focus on recovery of independence to allow people to recover some semblance of their normal life, their normal routines. And it helps to treat cognitive and motor impairments. Then they go on to say there is increasing evidence that chronic stroke patients maintain brain plasticity, meaning that there is still potential for additional recovery. So the reason this is relevant is because brain plasticity has a lot to do with how your brain grows and learns over time. Typically, children have much higher brain plasticity, and this is because their brains are still growing and they're making new connections all the time. And because of that, they need greater brain plasticity in order to achieve that kind of growth. But you do lose brain plasticity over time, which, for example, would explain like why people tend to lucid dream less as they grow older, because there is less brain plasticity. But at the same time, everybody does have some degree of brain plasticity because you are still capable of learning even when you are an adult, and um, through your adulthood and old age as well. You do maintain some degree of brain plasticity, but perhaps not as much as you had when you were younger. And this is under normal conditions. So they say that even chronic stroke patients do have some degree of brain plasticity, and this helps them recover. Essentially, if any connections in their brain were disrupted because of the stroke, um, say some neurons died, for instance, because of a lack of blood supply, then they do still maintain the ability to reestablish connections and therefore recover. They go on to say that traditional motor rehabilitation is applied through physical therapy and/or occupational therapy. Current approaches of motor rehabilitation include functional training, strengthening exercises, and range of movement exercises. In addition, techniques based on postural control, stages of motor learning, and movement patterns have been proposed, such as in the, I can't pronounce that, in the, I'm going to try Bobath concept and Bunstrom approach, among others. After patients complete subacute rehabilitation programs, many still show significant upper limb motor impairment. So this goes back to what we were saying before. There is some degree of brain plasticity even after a chronic stroke, which does help the patient recover to a certain degree with the help of various rehabilitation treatments. But even then, many patients do still have significant upper limb motor impairment because brain plasticity isn't so great that it can help heal completely, though it does allow you to get back some motor function. So this has important functional implications that ultimately reduce their quality of life. Therefore, alternate methods to maximize brain plasticity after stroke need to be developed. Okay, so now we going back to the title, know why this immersive motor imagery BCI-driven VR system is necessary for rehabilitation, because they have established the effects of a chronic stroke now, and also established why rehabilitation helps, but doesn't necessarily aid full recovery, and can only get you partially there. So the alternative they are proposing is a BCI-driven VR system, which we will now see how it helps the patient. So they go on to say that so far there is growing evidence that action observation and motor imagery improve motor function, but techniques based in this paradigm are not widespread in clinical settings. So there are two terms here, action observation and motor imagery, which you might not have come across before. So action observation essentially refers to the idea that executing an action yourself and watching someone else execute that same action will activate the same neural pathways. And motor imagery is an idea that kind of works off of action observation. Essentially, that action observation can be used, you might have heard of it as image training in sports. It can be used to train a person for physical movement. So a lot of athletes, for instance, when they're injured, may do image training in which they imagine the techniques they would have to use and imagine themselves executing a particular action instead of actually performing that themselves in practice. So this can be used to improve motor function, but is not typically used for rehabilitation. Then they go on to say, as motor recovery is a learning process, the potential of motor imagery as a training paradigm relies on the availability of an efficient feedback system. To date, a number of studies have demonstrated the positive impact of virtual reality based in neuroscientific grounds on recovery, with proven effectiveness in the stroke population. So they do establish here that virtual reality, that current VR tools, as they are, can help with recovery in the brain, and are proven to work in the stroke population. But they also do go on to say that patients without active movement cannot benefit from current VR tools due to low range of motion, pain, fatigue, etc. So although it does have the potential to work in the stroke population, there are some people who may not be able to benefit from these tools because, like, obviously using VR does require some movement. And if a person does not have the appropriate range of motion, or has trouble moving certain limbs, or their head, or whatever it may be, then they might not be able to move in a way that would allow them to properly use current VR tools. So therefore, you need some way to directly train the central nervous system, and they say this was promoted by establishing an alternative pathway between the user's brain and a computer system. And then here they finally introduce BCI VR systems, which they were discussing in the title. They say that this is possible by using EEG-based brain-computer interfaces, since they can provide an alternative non-muscular channel for communication and control to the external world, while they could also provide a cost-effective solution for training. So, essentially, a brain-computer interface is a device that allows neuronal signals to be translated into an external device. For example, when people use like robotic limbs, this is an example of a brain-computer interface because the neuronal signals are being translated into the movement of the robotic limb. They say in rehabilitation, BCIs could offer a unique tool for rehabilitation since they can stimulate neural networks through the activation of mirror neurons by means of action observation, motor intent, and motor imagery that could potentially lead to post-stroke motor recovery. So, when I was saying before that action observation allows the same neural pathways to be stimulated whether you perform an action or you watch someone else perform an action, the neural pathways that are stimulated there are the mirror neurons. Thus, BCIs could provide a backdoor to the activation of motor neural circuits that are not stimulated through traditional rehabilitation techniques. So essentially, this means that a person would not necessarily have to move their body at all if they don't have the ability to do so in order to use the BCI-based VR. And this allows someone to get rehabilitation treatment even if they don't have a wide range of movement. So now in this next paragraph, they go a little bit deeper into the methods for how they are going to be assessing the effectiveness of the BCI system. So take a minute to read through this paragraph and then we'll go over it together. So feel free to pause the video here. Okay, so essentially what they're saying is that alpha and beta EEG rhythms, essentially two different ranges of frequencies, are going to be tracked during when using BCI systems for motor rehabilitation because destabilizations in the rhythms help to indicate movement. They say that, for example, the alpha rhythm desynchronizes and causes a mu rhythm in the sensory and motor cortices of the brain. And along with the mu rhythms, destabilizations in the beta rhythm will help to form an event-related desynchronization, what they over here call an ERD. And this helps to show when a motor action is executed. So in theory, this also should happen. This destabilization should also happen when the BCI system is used for motor rehabilitation. So that's why it's important in the study. So we're going to stop there for now in this video, but I will be making a part 2. So if you enjoyed this, please go check that out as well. I'm trying to make my videos a little bit shorter so that it's easier to understand the concepts, and also so that we can go over individual sections of a research paper instead of doing the entire thing together. But feel free to let me know in the comments which format you liked better. Hope to see you in the next video.